Hello and welcome to the African Utility Week studio. I'm Ashley Taron, Content Editor of ESI Africa. Joining us today we have Phil Dingle, Marketing Director of Lucy Electric. Welcome, Phil. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Ashley. Nice to be here.
Yes. How are you enjoying the show so far?
Very good. A lot of good interaction, a lot of good people. I would say it's a much more exciting, engaging event than 2016, which from our point of view, having put a lot more effort into it, is really good for us.
Okay, no, fantastic. So Phil, I want to start by asking you, with the power generation network increasingly becoming more complex, especially when we're seeing more alternative power technologies coming into play, how is distribution technology adapting to this and keeping up with these fast developments?
Yeah, so I think from our point of view, Lucy Electric's been involved in secondary distribution for many years, 100 years heritage in the electrical industry. The traditional power distribution element is still there. What we're having to add to the network is the control, the automation, the monitoring to be able to understand the network and actually to be able to control and manage it given the variabilities of the new technologies that are coming onto the network. So particularly the impact that renewables is having where it's connected at much lower levels in the grid, at a residential level or just above that.
And in terms of the smart framework, is the grid becoming smarter? The way that we're connecting, is that becoming smarter? Are we becoming smarter? Are technologies becoming smarter?
I think the technologies are becoming smarter from a utility point of view. I don't think as consumers we're yet engaged in the way smart could be in the full view of the Internet of Things. I think we're a long way from that. That will only come when people are fully engaged with smart meters. So that's not part of our scope. But certainly from a utility point of view, their ability to understand what's happening at the lower levels of the network is becoming much more important, but also is the need to control. And there's some interesting things we've got on our stand in terms of particularly monitoring on the low voltage network that's highlighting the need and the why that these things need to be put in place.
And in terms of new technologies that Lucy Electric is looking at and launching into the markets, is there anything exciting?
Yeah, so we're looking at two things this year at African Utility Week. The first one is our RTU, our Remote Terminal Unit technology, Gemini 3, where we're looking at the control and operation of not just our ring main units, but our overhead line switches, wherever they are in the distributed network. But we're adding to the control also various monitoring functionality so that it gives the utility the understanding of where faults have occurred, quick isolation of faults, the ability then to reconfigure and restore the network so that the number of minutes customers are disconnected is really reduced to a minimum. At the other end of the scale is our grid key system, which is a low voltage monitoring system, and that's come from low carbon fund technology money that's been put forward by Ofgem, the UK regulator, and that's very much looking at the impact of renewables, particularly residential scale PV, on the distribution network and the impact that that has on managing the network, and there's some very real challenges there.
In terms of the information that the grid key can provide you with, what are some of the top or the key features that it can assist with?
So, I mean, the phrase that we would use there is actionable information. It's about what do you do with the knowledge you gain. So we would break the types of information that the utilities can learn from the LV monitoring down into 4 groups. So firstly, it's power quality. So what voltage frequency is being provided to residential consumers or consumers in general. One of the byproducts of putting renewables PV onto the network at a lower level is that completely distorts the centrally managed voltage and frequency. There's the whole power quality issue. The second is technical losses, whether it's technical or commercial,
Okay.
i.e. technical is engineering related, commercial losses is basically theft. So how much of your energy is being stolen by the customers? So depending on where you are in the world, that's a really major issue or a minor issue.
Sure.
The third group links to predictive maintenance, being able to identify faults in advance of them actually deteriorating to a level where they're going to actually cause a cable or some piece of equipment to blow. You can see the trend, you can see spikes that are going to lead to a fault. And then the final grouping is really linked to just general information in terms of planning of the network. And there's an example we have on our stand of a low voltage network in a city in the northwest of England, where the difference between a specific day, a cloudy day in England versus a sunny day in England, is an actual consumption of 250 amps. So everybody at home, everybody using everything electrical, as opposed to a really sunny day, nobody home, they're not using electricity. And at that point, the PV is acting as a net generator, so therefore putting 50 amps onto the circuit. So from a utility point of view, how do you plan, how do you manage that degree of variability?
And where is the software being used currently?
So the software as such, as I said, it came from technology funding in the UK. Operationally, there are about 800 monitoring systems on the network. To date, it's collected over some 60 billion data points of information that were being used to analyze. The easiest way of working with this is that we host the software on a cloud-based data center, designed for that purpose, but it's the utilities data. So they can access in terms of predetermined reports, alarms, or via a website they can go in and interrogate information much as you would anything else.
Okay, yeah, fantastic. So then I want to talk about the growth in the energy sector and what opportunities you feel are not being sufficiently exploited when we're comparing the emerging markets to the developed.
So I'd phrase that in two ways. I think when you first of all look at the mature markets, the challenge, even if you were to look at Cape Town or any of the developed cities in South Africa, or any of the other cities in Africa, you have an infrastructure that was installed and created before the concept of smart grids, before the concept of automation came along. So the challenge for the utilities is how do you retrospectively go back and upgrade that level to provide the level of customer service that is now demanded in a modern network. So there was a case in point from a presentation this morning at a breakfast workshop from ECG in Ghana, where they had a completely dumb, non-automated network, and if there was a fault, it was taking them on average 72 hours to be able to locate, rectify, solve the problem and reconnect the customers. By automating that network, they've been able to reduce that time to 6 hours.
That's fantastic.
So a great example, but that's an investment in upgrading a mature infrastructure. With the emerging markets, particularly where you have the desire to bring electricity to some 600 plus million people in Africa, then it's the opportunity to create an infrastructure that is fit for purpose and hopefully is future-proof, so that there isn't the desire to have to go back and repeat some of the lessons we've learned in moving from where we are to where we are now.
Yeah, sure. So then my favorite question that I love to ask is, we can call it some blue sky thinking, if you like. What are your top 3 predictions for the African power sector over the next 5 years?
Okay, so I think the first one I would say is that we're seeing lots of disruptive technologies coming along linked to the whole low carbon agenda. So whether it's renewables in terms of PV, wind, hydro, geothermal in parts of Africa. So lots of technologies for generation. We're already seeing storage in terms of batteries starting to come into play that makes the use of electricity much more beneficial, much more user-friendly in many locations. And then what we're also going to see is the alternate, which is the usage, which is low-carbon vehicles, electric vehicles. And as an example there, Tesla announced the launch of their Model 3 earlier this year.
Yes.
They already have pre-orders for 400,000 cars worldwide. So if you just think of that technology being applied by other manufacturers in the automotive industry, that's going to run faster than the utilities are going to be able to cope with the infrastructure to support the cars. So that's my first one, is the disruptive technology that brings to the marketplace. The second one is, I think, the link to the technology. It's the fact that will be grasped by consumers. We as individuals will want to use it, we will want to deploy it and use it, again, faster than the utilities can regulate for invasive technologies or how to manage it on its network. Again, if you look at our breakfast briefing this morning, Sandili Mapolo from Ethequeni outlined the challenges they face as Ethequeni in terms of how does a utility get paid in this new world for providing the infrastructure for consumers to access electricity, but not get paid when the generation's being done largely at home or in a local area. And then my final one is, there's lots of talk within the utility industry of wanting to get to this panacea of business as usual. Because there was a time in the past when everybody knew what business as usual meant. The problem now is everybody has a desire for business as usual, but what does it actually mean? You know, how good are our respective crystal balls to say that's what the future looked like? So that's my three challenges for you.
And I think that's a perfect question to end off this discussion.
Okay.
Thank you very much for joining us, Phil. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Okay.
I'm Ashley Turan, reporting from the African Utility Week studio.